Welcome to another episode of Cal's Corner Radio here on the X Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. The executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Now, as we talk about in every episode here, on Cal's Corner, we cover everything from politics to the paranormal. And where it concerns politics more so than the paranormal, at least today, there's a lot to cover, so let's get started. Let's start with an update real quick on communist North Korea. Now, a lot of people have noticed that in my writings, I always say communist North Korea, communist China, communist Cuba. The reason I say that is because it's true. If they weren't communist, I wouldn't describe them as being that, of course. And I want to drive home that point because I'm not a spring chicken anymore. And when I hear younger people talk and laud communism and socialism as if it's an ideal way to run things, they're so ignorant of history, it's really tragic. And what's even more scary, in my opinion, is that people who don't understand the true nature of communism vote, and that's real frightening. So getting back to communist North Korea, it seems that things are chilling a little bit on the PR front, and nobody knows yet, at least officially, whether this is just PR jockeying before the theoretical summit in June between American President Donald Trump and the leader of communist North Korea, theoretically in Singapore, unless it does get canceled. Trump is being a bit coy, and there have been some threats to cancel the summit, including a more near-term one that is supposed to occur very shortly between South Korea and North Korea. North Korea is indicating it may pull out of that summit. North Korea is using the excuse that long-planned military exercises between the United States and South Korean forces somehow sour the mood or somehow are a threat to it. And that's just nonsense because these exercises are planned a long time in advance. And it's not a new exercise. It's just an annual rehash of making sure everybody stays sharp, at least in the U.S. allied side of things. So we'll see how this works out. If North Korea does pull out of the summit and there is no meeting between either South Korea or the USA, they're going to have to come up with some excuse to try to save face. And that's going to be hard to do since it seems like the West is basically allowing them to say it's your move. And that's exactly what seems to be going on. Now, you will notice if you follow this that there's another kind of disturbing undercurrent here regarding where it concerns communist North Korea. This is this left-wing liberal idea that this country pretty much does anything major decision-wise on its own. And that has simply not been true. It's not been true for many years, especially since communist China filled in the void after the collapse of the Soviet Union. We must remember that communist North Korea owes its origins essentially to the Russians, not the Chinese, because it was Stalin who begrudgingly gave his approval for the Communist Party to rise up and basically create what is now known as North Korea. So after the fall of the Soviet Union, China stepped in. They basically tell Communist North Korea what to do. No major decisions are made by the North Koreans without Chinese approval because China can do whatever it wants with North Korea. And there's a parallel here, and the reason I'm mentioning this is because this is one of the ways that the communist Chinese try to take over. Historically, what they try to do is they have what are called proxy countries. These are countries that they formally align themselves with, declare that they're best buddies with, and they will use that country as a proxy to mess with the real target, which is another nation. A good example is not only North Korea, where it can mess with South Korea and the United States, but, look at the issue of their nuclear weapons. We must remember that communist North Korea, since it went public with its disclosure that it was making nuclear weapons, it always was clear that it wanted to develop intercontinental ballistic missiles that had the capability of flying all the way from North Korea to hitting targets even on the east coast of the United States. Now, there's a couple of different ways to do that, but that is a technical milestone that if North Korea ever achieved it, would put it in the elite class of nations where it concerns having the top grade, if you will, level of ICBMs. And of course, North Korea wants to be part of that exclusive club. Pakistan is part of that club. India is part of that club. Russia, United States, even Israel is. although in the case of Israel, they are not a formally declared nuclear power. So the point is, Communist North Korea has always been very clear about what they wanted to achieve. And if you look at their latest missile launchings over the last couple of years, they have pretty much reached breakout point like Iran did with their nuclear weapons program, where they could make a bomb if they wanted to, in the case of Iran, or in the case of North Korea, they could actually finally have some missiles that could go into mass production that could at least, at a minimum, hit targets on the west coast of the U.S., which is critical for North Korea if war should ever break out, or they might go as far as the east coast, depending on how the trajectory of the rocket was, combined with the rotation of the Earth over time, blah, blah, blah. So now that they have claimed to have achieved this milestone, or let's say they're at the crossroads of this milestone at the very minimum, now, of course, everyone has a theoretical interest to come to the negotiating table and try to work out a deal before you can't go back. And when I say you can't go back, it is the U.S. sound doctrine, meaning at least it has my vote of support, that North Korea must never be allowed to have such weapons. It's bad enough they have nuclear weapons. It's bad enough that they broke the terms of the Non-Proliferation Treaty. They're not the only one to do that. Iran has done it before, yet we're supposed to trust them. And the NPT doesn't have a perfect track record, because unless it is ruthlessly enforced, and that's a key word there, ruthlessly, it has no teeth. And lately, with the polarization between Russia and China and the U.S., where each country will align with the other just to spite the other, right or wrong, it does happen, then the old outdated model at the UN of the UN Security Council just shows how it is weak and actually incompetent where it concerns dealing with the NPT. Now, we must remember that in the case of China, they control Pakistan, okay? And that is something you say, well, how does that affect me? It is a game changer because, of course, the real point in controlling Pakistan is to mess with India. Because, like it or not, agree with it or not, believe it or not, doesn't matter. Facts stand independent, thankfully, of anyone's single opinion. This century, if we're to label it, is essentially the rise of Asia. Let's be honest. The economic might of Asia, just based on the sheer mass of population alone, stacks the deck in Asia's favor. India has the potential to be the world's next superpower. I've written about this for years. I've seen the evidence firsthand. They have the world's largest population of young people. Their middle class is greater than the population of the entire United States. So with over 1 billion people more than the USA has, India is heading in the right direction overall. But in order to really be a superpower, you have to make some tough decisions. You have to show some backbone that you otherwise wouldn't have to bother with, at least where it concerns many important issues, if you weren't going to try to be a superpower. And what I found living in India and in Asia overall is not only are the Indians much more aware of what China is really doing versus the West, which remains largely ignorant and inexcusably apologetic for China, what Indians see is what's really going on, which is a slow, systematic, and steadily progressing takeover on key, let's call them choke points in the world, allowing China to essentially call all the shots that really ultimately matter. If you look at what the Chinese are doing in Pakistan, Pakistan loves to rave about the incredible infrastructure that they're building. Well, they should, because China's going to pump in about $1 trillion over the next several years. And they're building all and pretty much only all of the huge mega infrastructure projects in Pakistan, which include these massive highways. They include taking over and running a key shipping port, and also making sure that there's entire new railway delivery systems that go all the way from different cities in Pakistan all the way to Beijing, China. It's a effort to link railway systems and have the mass transports of goods and raw material at an unprecedented level, and China is leading the global effort on that. And what they've done is they have also secured most of the mineral rights to key strategic minerals in Afghanistan, over 80% of those rights. They're paying billions of dollars, and once again, they are building roads and highways and railways so they can use the railroad system to take stuff straight from Afghanistan all the way again through Pakistan or to Beijing once again. So what you have is China becoming multiple sourced, meaning it buys its oil from enough diverse suppliers so that if something is wrong in Venezuela, it's not affected. This is a key Chinese mindset, if you will. They plan generations ahead versus the West, which tends not to think that far ahead. The West instead thinks of election to election, and that's not necessarily an issue in China, especially when you have a dictator now who is dictator for life, as their current one is, unless they reverse direction in that issue. Now then you have the issue of India rising. China doesn't want India to rise. China doesn't want any country to rise that is a competitor to it. China has an open secret plan called the 2050 plan. I've reported on it before, which is basically to knock off the U.S. and be the world's only superpower. And of course, India would be a threat to that. And they want to keep India permanently down at number 3 or 4. And that suits Chinese interests just fine. But of course, that goes against what countries like India want, as well as the United States. So we'll be back after the commercial break, and we'll continue.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV. Plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com.
Welcome back to segment 2 here on Cal's Corner radio show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show, once again, is Rob McConnell. And we were talking about communist China versus India, and again, you might, regardless of where you live, let's say you live in the U.S., you might say, how does this affect me? I'm still going to get cheap goods, whether they're made in India, whether they're made in China. The point is, we understand that Asia is a manufacturing powerhouse, bankrolled and fueled largely by the West, which is ironic because this allows China, which is not a benign, peaceful country. It is not a benign, peaceful regime. It is a totalitarian dictatorship. And what is happening in China, the world is just letting China get away with it. It's not holding it accountable. It's like the world doesn't care, especially this youngest generation. In fact, they're so ignorant, they'll wear Che Guevara shirts because it looks very iconic, or what they'll do is they'll brandish words like socialism and communism, interchange them, intermix them, and have no idea what they're really talking about, and that's very common in today's social media dominated world. So you have the rise of Asia economically. The number of billionaires in Asia now outnumbers those in the West. So the money is shifting over to Asia. The population of Western countries among the so-called white or Caucasian race is going down. That is happening true across Europe. That's been going on for years. And of course, they just announced today in the news that in the United States, the population of new babies being born has dropped to a record 30-year low. What is happening in other countries is the population continues to outpace the society's ability to sustain that quality of living that should be there. In other words, they don't even have a good quality of living now, and then of course there's the population that explodes. India is a good example. It cannot grow jobs fast enough to feed what are hundreds of millions of new kids coming into the workforce every year after they graduate from high school or college. The economics are just not there. It's going to take many more years before they would scale up to that level. In the meantime, what do? You have a problem. So this is what's going on in the world, and because China is determined to become the world superpower at the expense of other nations, not in a let's win this thing fair and square type contest, but using threats, intimidation, violence, military if necessary. Let's briefly review what they're doing. They have a plan called the 2020 Plan. That's the name of it. The documents are classified. They have been leaked. I've reported on them from India. And basically, they outline the plan to invade the island of Taiwan from 16 different points, then to take it over, and then strike so fast that the West cannot respond in time. And then the other thing they're doing is they've been creating artificial islands in the South China Sea, militarizing them, of course, so that they can provide a key strategic armed choke point, if necessary, should hostilities break out. Now, again, this is what they're poised to do. It's not 2020, so we can't say for sure with 100% certainty that China is going to invade Taiwan. Of course, if they can conquer or subdue the island or reabsorb it, whatever you want to call it, assimilate it, I guess is the best term, without firing a shot, of course they're going to try to do that. But if necessary, they are putting in place all of the key elements that are vital that would support a military invasion and the ability to fight a war, taking the island while also holding off the United States just long enough to achieve that military objective so that by the time the West could respond in a credible fashion, this would involve probably the military powers of India, Australia, Great Britain, the U.S., perhaps Canada. It would involve Japan, absolutely, and what was left of Taiwan. It would involve perhaps even Vietnam. They're part of allied countries now with the U.S. and India, all walled against China to try to hem it in. And so what would happen is there would be this theoretical conflict, and by the time that China could respond quick enough and surround the island and contain it, and the West could respond, it would be too late. It would be a fait accompli, and China would be in a bargaining position at that point to either keep the island, kind of the way Russia managed to secure Crimea. The U.S. had an agreement with the Ukrainians to come to their defense. That was a key condition that Ukraine had to agree to or wanted in the agreement in exchange for giving up its nuclear weapons and giving them back to Russia. We promised to defend them, and that promise was broken by American President Barack Obama. So what happened is Putin knew that Obama had no stomach to enforce that defense agreement. So he went into Crimea, seized it, broke international laws, held this referendum, now owns it, is not going to give it back. A similar thing can happen with Taiwan. And if China wants to open up two more fronts to distract the West during those times of tension, all it has to do is tell Pakistan to stir things up with the border with India, which would already be on alert because of a tension between China and India anyway. And then they could also stir things up with North Korea, which of course would tie up U.S. Forces and resources there to support the currently existing troops that are already in South Korea. So don't be fooled by Chinese intentions. People tend to forget, and I just don't understand why they do this, that they are a communist country, okay? And I'm going to share one last piece of news with you about communist China. And hold this up as a shining example of just how ignorant and inexcusably, I'll actually call it what I think it is, morally bankrupt, the West's ignorance or refusal to report on China where it really exists, okay? Now, there is a province in China called Xinjiang. It is home to Muslims. There's a lot of Muslims there, okay? What the Chinese have been doing, and this is over an area that is half the size of the country of India, and to put India's size in perspective, India is about the size of the entire European Union. Only India has 1.3 billion people. The EU has about 550 million. So imagine an area roughly half the size of India or the European Union where Muslims live in this area of China and Kazakhstan, and they're being rounded up by the hundreds of thousands, and they're being put, as I speak, into internment camps for re-education purposes, where they are ordered, in exchange for being released and allowed to go back into society, they have to renounce their religion, they have to renounce all religions, they have to thank the Communist Party, they have to denounce essentially themselves and say that the new you, blah, 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 is courtesy of the Communist Party. It's the usual big brother Orwellian communist brainwashing stuff that's right out of the Cold Wars, because that's exactly when that stuff was perfected. And this is what China is doing. You know, China is accused of organ harvesting. China doesn't care about human rights. We all know that. They even have a social credit system now in effect, which if you don't earn enough positive social credits, you can't do anything in that society. And I'll give you a real example here. Let's say that you love your Xbox. Nothing wrong with that. But in China, in the eyes of the Communist Party, that's a no-no. In fact, if you play your Xbox for more than 30 minutes a day, you start earning negative social credits in China, and they go into a Big Brother computer system, and when you apply for a loan or a job or you try to get an airline ticket or a bus ticket, you may not be allowed to access those basic services because you don't have a positive rating, a social credit rating high enough. But let's say that you spent, instead of that 30 minutes a day, you were reading about Chairman Mao. Well, that's okay. You get bonus credits for that. And of course, you can have a job, you can have a car loan, whatever. It doesn't matter as long as you're a good comrade. And that's really the type of control that the communist Chinese are putting over their country. And it's getting worse, and they're using technology to do it. And you are seeing other countries starting to ape parts of it. And it is really scary because in the West, they tend to ignore it, just like sometimes in the USA during the Cold War. I remember this. people would talk about Russia rather than talk about the fact it was a communist country. And somehow, again, they would excuse communism as if it's some utopian thing that can really be achieved, that its intentions are good. No, just look at your history. I know I sound like a broken record on this, but I'll repeat it one last time because it's true. Communism is responsible for more mass murders than any other political system ever since it came into being. You can look it up. In Guinness Book of World Records, the largest mass murders in history have been China's Chairman Mao. They've been Joseph Stalin. Hitler is not even in number 3, as bad as he was. I think he's number 5. He wasn't a communist. But again, when you have tens of millions of people uprooted, displaced, interned in camps, executed, tortured, imprisoned, the mass graves, the censoring, you name it, the abuses, courtesy of communism, how the hell can anybody profess to have credibility and say, oh, this stuff just works, we just had the wrong leaders? No, it doesn't work. You had leaders who carried out what it really stands for, and thank God, based on the verdict of history, it has lost. The only holdover that really matters now is China, and the question is becoming rapidly, does the West and the rest of the world have the moral courage to stand up to China and stop letting it get away with doing whatever it wants? If we can't stop China now, do you think it's going to be easier to stop them in 10 years? No, it may be impossible. We'll be back after this commercial break.
From our broadcast studios in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada, to the world and beyond, you're watching the X-Zone Broadcast Network, www.xzbn.net.
AVS Media Den.
You have heard of the X-Zone? Now watch it on SimulTV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is SimulTV. SimulTV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X-Zone, Sci-Fi, and Horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world, interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. SimulTV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have SimulTV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com.
Welcome back to segment 3 here on Cal's Corner radio show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Now, we've talked about China for half the show now. I think I really have nothing else to add. I think you understand my point. I think I can defend my points with facts. If you disagree, please feel free to do that. I've reported on this stuff for years, and again, what concerns me as a human being is this ignorance and willingness to do nothing, eagerness to do nothing, including even admit that there's a problem. And I just find that bizarre. Do you have to go to India to wake up to the obvious? Maybe that's the answer. But of course, not everybody's going to go, not even close. So I don't know what to think. I've just never seen this amount of denial before on so many different issues. All right, let's talk about a different part of the world now, another equally volatile in a different way part of the world. This is, again, the Middle East and what's been going on in Gaza, in the area controlled by the terrorist group Hamas, and, of course, Israel. Now, once again, every time Hamas stirs up some trouble, they follow this pattern, okay? And if you don't believe me, I want you to write this down because I'm not psychic. And you watch the next time Hamas does anything of relevance along this, you'll see that they'll do these simple steps. What they'll do is come up with the name of a cause, okay? Doesn't matter whether it's valid or not. It just has to have a name, a catchy slogan. You know, propaganda does that. So what they're going to do is they come up with the name of a cause, and then they pick a date, and they say, okay, we're going to do this in support of this cause. Now, we're not terrorists, we're part of a resistance, okay? See, they mix the term resistance and terrorism. It's really the same thing where it concerns them, but they don't like to call themselves terrorists because it's bad for business. So instead, they like to say they're freedom fighters, or they like to say they're part of a resistance movement. And we know this because in the last war that Hamas started and lost against Israel, they found many copies of their actual manual instructing their Hamas operatives what to call this stuff in case they were captured or interrogated, or especially gave interviews to the media. They were to use the term resistance rather than terrorist group. It was comical from the standpoint that here they are busted with their own printing materials, which Hamas later lied and said were Zionist forgeries, which was ridiculous. So anyway, getting back to the issue of Gaza and Hamas, you'll see that they come up with a cause, they come up with a slogan, they pick a date, then they say that these are peaceful protests, okay? But they aren't really peaceful protests. And of course, if anybody acts up in a violent manner, they were just a rogue operative. And then later, Hamas will declare that person to be a martyr, and then they will pay thousands of dollars to the family members of that Palestinian who has been killed. Because what Hamas loves to do is rake up the body count. They love dead Palestinians from the standpoint that the more people that get killed, the worse it makes Israel and people who are against Hamas look. It's very simple. And I want you to think about this carefully for a moment, because we've all seen these images before. Think back years ago in the early 2000s, okay, when Yasser Arafat was alive. You'll remember very vivid, very moving images of young Palestinian kids standing in front of huge Israeli tanks throwing stones. Very powerful imagery. You know, this tiny kid, sweet innocent child, is holding a rock and he's throwing it at the Israeli tank. And of course, he has no chance to do anything. He's not going to win that fight. But as compelling as that image is, it's very dramatic. Most people didn't bother asking a simple, obvious, and logical question. Why is there a child standing in front of a tank in the first place? What kind of parent, if they love their kid, is going to say, yeah, go in front of that tank with a rock, have fun? Come on. That thing was staged and phony. Those kids were deliberately put in harm's way because they were being used as puppets to serve their criminal masters. And when I say criminal, they break the laws. They kill people. They murder people. They're terrorists. That's Hamas. So this is the pattern that they follow. So this time around, it's the march for return. Return to what? Hamas can't even answer that basic question. Return to what? Hamas does not speak for all the Palestinians. They speak only for the Gazans, and they only speak for them because they won't allow anybody else to do it. They'll kill them. We must remember that even the media today says that Gaza is occupied territory by Israel. My God, these people are so ignorant. Don't they remember their basic history that in the year 2005, why don't they get off their butt and look at YouTube and look this up? Israel pulled out of Gaza. You can watch the videos. They pulled out. They uprooted Jews and took them right out of there, cut their losses. And you can also see what happened. The Palestinians moved into these very advanced areas that the Jews lived in and totally destroyed it. They burned down the greenhouses and destroyed the infrastructure, just like they're doing now. And then, of course, it's Israel's fault that they're destroying the infrastructure, right? This is another insanity with the way this media coverage has gone. They say, is Israel boycotted Gaza? As if Israel's the only one boycotting Gaza. It's not true. It never has been that simple. In fact, Egypt is the one that shut the border between Gaza and Egypt. Duh, it's their country. So they shut off the border. Israel had nothing to do with it. Israel put their own border around there so that Hamas couldn't do what they've been trying to do for the last several weeks, which is to cut through the fence and go in and kill Jews. They admit that. In fact, the media is all upset over this recent mass shooting of Palestinians. I understand mass shootings are not good, but I'm going to be very blunt with you. I think it depends what you're shooting. If you're shooting a bunch of terrorists, I don't think that's a bad thing, okay? Yes, I know they're human beings and so on. But to use an analogy, if you're fighting in World War II against Hitler and the Nazis, do you really care how many Nazis you have to kill to win the battle? If it's a straight up fight and you're obeying all the laws and doing whatever you're supposed to do in warfare and it's straight up, nothing wrong with that at all. In fact, it was people who refused to let the U.S. get involved in the war in the first place that delayed the U.S. entry into the war that arguably allowed Japan and Germany to become more powerful than they otherwise would have been. Remember, it took Pearl Harbor to wake America up to the obvious to put them in the war. Britain for years had been saying and suffering, we've got to stop this guy. But just enough la-la liberals, Democrats especially, were saying, nope, we have to remain neutral. It's not our problem. Well, again, you have the same issue here in the Middle East. Again, Hamas doesn't speak for all the Palestinians. They only speak for the ones that they ruled by force over in Gaza. The Palestinian National Authority claims they speak for all Palestinians, but Hamas just doesn't get that memo. Or they have their own view. It's different. So there is no single unified force that speaks for the Palestinians. So let's say you're Israel or any other country and you want to get something done with a country called Palestine. Who do you go to? Well, right now you got to go to both, and that's just not going to work. So nothing gets done. But of course, it's Israel's fault. Well, no, it's not. Because, again, another sickness in the present media coverage, and I go through this with people on social media all the time, is they like to say Hamas is a legitimate government of Gaza, elected by the people. Well, there was one election, okay, and they did win it. But then in 2007, Hamas staged a violent coup and murdered over 650 Palestinian National Authority personnel, kicked out Abbas from Gaza, where he's in the West Bank now, and has been ever since. And Hamas, ever since they did that, has not been a legitimate government. There has not been a free and fair election in Gaza since then, and they won't allow it. And yet the media likes to equate Hamas as if they're some credible entity, and they're not. So they deliberately oppress their people. They execute their opponents. They blame Israel for everything. They use human shields, okay? We've seen that before. They don't deny it. They like to call people martyrs instead of terrorists or cowards. They claim that these are peaceful protesters, but yet Hamas has just now admitted that 50 of the most recent people killed were Hamas militants. Those are terrorists. They can call them resistance fighters, whatever, but they're terrorists. And you have to remember that the definition of terrorism is very simple. It is a systematic, deliberate targeting of innocent civilians for the purposes of political or social change. That's why terrorists like to terrorize people, target the innocent, hoping to pressure you or the government into doing something that you'd rather not do. That's the point of terrorism. Freedom fighters, on the other hand, don't do that. They don't harm innocent civilians. They limit their attacks to government or official institutions. They attack a federal building instead of individual innocent civilians who are at home. They don't go into their houses at night and slit their throats like Hamas terrorists have done to Jewish families. So, again, it is bizarre to see that the Western media, as educated as it usually is so ignorant on this issue. They keep using these terms, describing things inaccurately, and it's from the left-wing side of things. Unfortunately, the left wing controls most of the media, and the media has become so polarized now that you basically have to rely on several different sources to try to separate fact from fiction, and then you better invoke the dictum of trust but verify. We'll be back after this commercial break.
Heard of the X Zone? Now watch it on Simul TV, plus 500 video games, live TV channels, free video on demand, worldwide, and more. Does this sound like tomorrow's television? Well, it is, but you can have it today, right now. It is Simul TV. Simul TV offers what the others only wish they could provide. 15 exclusive channels like X Zone, sci-fi, and horror. We are worldwide. No other provider offers that. 500 built-in video games. No need to have an extra expensive system. We have them included. Free video on demand. Live streaming events from around the world. Interactive online network, and much more. Tomorrow's TV today. Simul TV. Sound too good to be true? Well, it's not. You can have Simul TV today. Sign up at simultv.com. Do it today.
The new nonfiction book, Razor of Madness, is similar to cult movies like Clockwork Orange, Dragon's Tattoo, or The Other Side of Hell. Wayne Morin Jr. and Thomas Lee Howell expose widespread and systematic deficiencies in this thought-provoking tell-all novel. Mind control rages among scholars in law schools. Human rights are ignored while thought reform and mental manipulation are accepted practices used as behavior modification. Dr. Louis Jolyon West comes to mind. Media and public scrutiny shows that United States mental hospitals are in fact destructive murder industries. Razor of Madness expose novel details this epidemic through an in-depth professional and personal investigation. For decades, there has been a revolving door policy that still releases killers and pedophiles back into society. The maestro of mind control continues to haunt America to this very day. Razor of Madness is available in paperback or as a downloadable ebook at Amazon.com.
I'm William S. Peckham. If you enjoy a good mystery with a touch of the paranormal, then you'll love my novel, From Out of the Woodwork. It's the story of a young Toronto contractor, Sean Kennedy, who buys derelict homes, guts them, and turns them into multifamily dwellings. Slums just waiting to happen. When Sean buys 29 Livery Lane, the house fights back. Former owners unexpectedly come out of the woodwork as he starts the destruction. The apparitions come to him when he touches old books, reads hidden letters, rummages through old boxes, finds a locket, or reads a discovered manuscript of a murder mystery. From Out of the Woodwork will take you from 1899 to the horror of the World Trade Center, September 11, 2001. Check out From Out of the Woodwork on my website, www.williamspeckham.com.
Welcome back to the fourth and final segment of Kal's Corner radio show here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. Once again, my name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host, and the executive producer of the show is Rob McConnell. Now, we've identified in the last segment a few of the tried and true tricks, the shtick, if you will, that Hamas likes to use every time it's up to its antics. And we've exposed the lies of the left-wing liberal media about Hamas, disgusting reporting that they continue to engage in today. Now, you might say, well, what does this have to do with me? Why do I even care what goes on in Gaza or West Bank or even Israel? Why do I care? It doesn't affect me. Rockets are not flying over my backyard. Well, let me tell you why it does affect you. Because whether you like it or not, agree with it or not, we are a global society. Something can happen wherever in the world, and it can affect the opposite side of the planet. That's just the way the world works. And increasingly, it is becoming interconnected. All right? Now, what's happening in the Middle East, and this is why the Palestinian problem has a new dimension to it that it's never had quite this dynamic before. You must remember that until just recently, there was universal condemnation among the Arab world, the Muslim world, of Israel regarding the Palestinians. That is no longer true. In fact, what's happening is there is an increasing number of Arab and Muslim nations who are taking Israel's side on things because they're worried about a larger issue than just the Palestinian problem. In fact, the Palestinians, as the world essentially is passing them by, have become a secondary issue, no longer a primary one. In fact, one can argue they were never even a primary one. Depends on how you view history. Now, let me explain what I mean on this. What you have in the Middle East is a struggle between two religious and political and geographical ideologies. One is Sunni Islam and the other is Shia Islam. Now, Sunnis and Shias, Sunnis S-U-N-N-I-S and Shias S-H-I-A-S, these are two sects of the religion of Islam, and they don't agree with each other. And they've been gleefully killing each other for over 1,400 years. That's a matter of historical fact. You can look it up. And the reason they kill each other is because each one believes the other is a heretic, and that they, not the other guy, their competitor, has the one true path for Islam. So what you have is you have Iran, which is the home to the Shias, and then you have the Saudis, who, of course, are the home to the Sunnis. And about 80% of the world in the Muslim faith is about Sunni Muslims. The rest are essentially Shias, for lack of a better term, and some other minor strains of it. The Alawites in Syria, of which the Assad regime, that dictator, Bashar Assad, who runs Syria, he is part of the Shia faith, but he is a Alawite. So we have in the Middle East, we have a struggle between the two forms of Islam because in the Middle East, the political systems are not separated from the religion. They are supposed to be in harmony with each other. Now, it's kind of interesting to see how some of this gets implemented. For example, one of my favorite countries in the Middle East, I'll be honest with you, is Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, and Abu Dhabi. I love those places, especially if you're from the West. You can do a lot of things there that couldn't even do in India, trust me. And It's just fantastic. But the reason I found it fantastic is because it's been westernized. So if I wanted to have some alcohol, I could. If I wanted to lie out there on the beach and there's bikinis next to me, I could enjoy that too. I could go shopping in modern stores. The world's largest mall, 1,200 stores, is there. You name it, they got it. So while they're westernized, on the other hand, there's only one authority, and that is the king or the emir or the leader. His word is God, essentially, for lack of a better term. So what you have in the Middle East is this dichotomy where you have dictatorships or kingdoms, whatever they want to call themselves, emirates, whatever, and they are, of course, single sole authority, or the power is in a handful of people, usually a single most powerful family. And then, of course, in exchange for your loyalty and your obedience, you may not pay any taxes, or it might be that you get money from the government, you get subsidies, and basically you're supposed to fly straight the way they see you, want you to do, and behave and mind your business, and life will treat you fine. And again, I've seen these types of political systems. They do seem to work from the standpoint of they get the job done. But on very small scale. You couldn't do that on something the size of a country of India, population-wise. But when you've got only less than 1 million people, like in some of these small emirates, you can get away with a lot of other things. And I'm not advocating that this is the right way to do things. But what's going on is you have the Saudis now leading the charge to modernize and become very Dubai-like. In fact, they formed strategic partnerships with the United Arab Emirates now to do this. They're setting up what is basically a $1 trillion effort to create an area the size of the country of Egypt. That's a lot of land. And this area will be an area in Saudi Arabia that is unlike any other place in the country. Men and women can mix. They don't have to wear burqas. They can drive. They can wear bikinis. You can drink alcohol. Essentially have fun. Enjoy life, and of course spend your money. And they want to make this a high-tech park. They are liberalizing their society to the point where AMC, the big movie chain company, is opening 100 theaters in Saudi Arabia in its first wave of expansion in many years. So what you have is a fight in the Middle East for the Saudis controlling essentially the so-called religious ideology mixed with the political ideology. Then you have Iran's view of things, which is very different. In the Iranian system, you have a all-powerful supreme leader called an Ayatollah. There's other Ayatollahs as well, but the very definition of an Ayatollah, believe it or not, and I'm not making this up, is somebody who is free of sin. He's a perfect guy. So think about that for a moment. Let that sink in. Can you name a single person that you know of, that you've shaken their hands, you've been to their house, you've eaten their dinner, whatever, that is perfect, that has no sin? Well, there is no such person because people sin, okay? They may try not to, but they do. So the point is, an Ayatollah is sinless. He's sin-free. He's a perfect guy. So Iran is run by this theocracy. As I explained recently, I had a conversation with a colleague of mine over Iran's democracy, and he was a bit surprised to find out that they have this guardian council, or council of guardians, who have to approve all political candidates. If you survive that vetting process, your name is on a ballot, then people vote. Fine. But in order to get on the ballot, you have to meet the ideological and political and religious approval of the Council of Guardians. Now imagine if the U.S. had a system like that. It wouldn't be the U.S. as we know it today, and Western civilization would never have evolved the way it has today. There would never be genuine democracy because Iran's system isn't truly democratic. And yet the media, in all their stupidity, keeps saying that it is. Well, it's not. But that's the way they misreport it. So what you have is you have these two countries, the powerhouses in the region, that control the religion and to a large degree, of course, the political systems. They don't agree with each other. They consider each other the enemy. And it's a zero-sum game for them, meaning only one can survive and the other must be at the expense of the other. So naturally, Iran has influence in Syria. They have influence in Lebanon. Hezbollah has won some important elections there. Gives them a lot more power now. Then you have the Saudis, who of course are aligned with countries like the United Arab Emirates. They are the ones who have been quietly approaching Israel. Israel has been working with them. They do not want to see Iran's interests expanded. Iran is also responsible for fueling key parts of the civil war in Yemen and backing the Houthis. The Houthis continue to fire rockets at the Saudis, trying to destroy some of their government buildings and even the homes of the Saudi leadership. Thankfully, the rockets have been shot down. And what Iran is doing is it is militarily expanding into Syria along the Golan Heights region that borders Israel. And what Israel has done is they have spent the last week especially attacking, launching over 70 missiles, destroying Iranian military targets, because Israel has said to Iran, we will not allow you to essentially creep up on us and bring a military front on our border. And Israel is absolutely right to do this. So Iran's interest has nothing to do with the Palestinians. They're not Shia Muslims. It has to do with hating Jews and celebrating the elimination of the state of Israel, because Iran is very clear. Israel has no right to exist. It is the little Satan. The U.S. is the great Satan. We have no right to exist either, according to them. And again, how the West and how the media can just bend over backwards and excuse this type of behavior is just absolutely ridiculous. Why don't they call out these Iranian talking heads and say, stop, you said death to America. Why are you even doing this? Get them to explain their ideology, to try to defend it. They can't do it credibly. And if someone's stupid enough to believe them, well, shame on them. So again, what bothers me is that people are not called on this when the facts are just amount of denial that's going on. I've just never seen it creep into mainstream society like this. It's a worst nightmare for me, because I remember as a young kid thinking, oh my God, if it's like this in the UFO field, I can only imagine how much worse it must be when it gets into mainstream society. And now that has happened with things like politics and what's going on in Israel or not going on, what's going on in China or not going on, with fake news and social media. This whole thing is just a huge mess. So anyway, that's our show for today. I hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week, and in about 2 weeks we'll have a ufologist on the show who will talk about the UFO waves of the late 1940s.
Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Are you or is someone you know struggling with addictions, depression, anxiety, relationships, low self-esteem, lack of confidence, grief, success, and prosperity? Do you know that your subconscious belief plays a big role in the outcome of your hard work? We can help you permanently change the beliefs that may be the reason for your struggles and failures. We care about getting you the return on your investment and the results you are looking for. We can help you be free of the limitations of your past and in realizing your highest potential. We work with people by phone and Skype. For more information, visit us at www.ritasoman.com. That's www.ritasoman.com. Do you think you have energy problems in your home? Do you feel better when you're away than when you're home? Joey Korn is a global leader in the world of dowsing who specializes in personal energy clearing and space clearing. He can help you create an ideal energy environment in your home no matter where you live in the world. Learn about his remote spiritual house cleaning services and much more at www.dowsers.com. You can get Joey's book, Dowsing, A Path to Enlightenment, as well as other dowsing books and tools, Kabbalah books, and Walter Russell books. Joey's work is really amazing. Go to dowsers.com right now. That's DOWSERS.com or call 1-877-DOWSING. That's 1-877-369-7464.